thank you very much, Governor, for those very, very kind words. Very, very much appreciated. And we were discussing, I don't know how many of you realize it, but this governor, Terry Branstad, is about to make history. He will get reelected. And shortly into his new term, he will set the record for overall the longest serving governor in the history of the United States. And what's amazing is governors have to make decisions. Governors have to do things. You often make enemies. You just can't give a speech. And unfortunately, we have a president who thinks you give speeches and that's governing. That's not governing. We'll get to that in a moment. So I don't want to jinx things. Terry's absolutely right. This is a business that is always full of upsets. But I think he will win re-election. And with that, history will be made, and a positive history. And unlike others who serve in high posts, his elections have been honest elections. And that gets to what Paul said about the importance of Secretary of State. Amazing that an office that should be just about the mechanics of ensuring smooth and honest elections is now a center of contention. And make no mistake, it is a center of contention. George Soros, has spent a lot of money on Secretary of State races, including one in Minnesota. They got a new Secretary of State several years ago, had a close senatorial election, and ballots mysteriously appeared in basements and elsewhere. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't about ghosts or zombies or vampires or whatever. And so they won an election. They won it, but we know how they did it. This is not supposed to be the United States of America. The rule of law has been mentioned tonight, trampled repeatedly by this administration, treating us like we're a third world country, like Venezuela or North Korea, where you don't make laws, you make decrees on the whim. So you see it with the IRS. Now, I come from New Jersey. We have a governor there who got in trouble about traffic at the George Washington Bridge. Sometimes amazed they notice there's traffic there. It seems to be an everyday occurrence. But anyway, he's been raked through the coals on it, on and on. Numerous investigations, including the U.S. Attorney. Now, contrast the coverage of that with the coverage of the ongoing IRS scandal. One of the most powerful agencies of the United States government misused its powers to suppress free speech in this country, to rig the 2012 election. They knew what happened in 2010 from those activists, and they made sure those organizations would be systematically targeted to make sure they did not have that kind of activism in 2012. And make no mistake, this scandal is just getting warmed up. It was not a rogue in Cincinnati. It goes right to the White House. It's amazing, the former IRS commissioner asked about his 120 visits to the White House. He said, oh, it's for all sorts of things, like roles at the Easter egg hunt. Well, there's more than Easter bunnies involved in this thing. And at this scandal, especially when Republicans get control of the Senate, which they will, we got a flavor of it here tonight, determined candidates, this thing will be investigated, just as Watergate was investigated, and the truth will out. And it's not going to be pleasant. The IRS is soon going to become RIP, rest in peace. You see the abuse everywhere. You see that the EPA waging a legal war against coal and other forms of energy. National Labor Relations Board, thankfully the Supreme Court next month will make a decision to roll back those illegal appointments, all the actions they took. You see for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, once a backwater agency, now making law up as it goes. You see it at the exchanges. As you know, when they wrote Obamacare, they thought it would be such a popular law that every state would want to set up exchanges, and therefore would qualify for subsidies. Well, 34 states chose not to. Yet the IRS is giving subsidies illegally. The law says you can't do it, but hey, what's the law? What's the Constitution? The way of these greater things they want to do for us. Well, eventually that case is going to make its way to the Supreme Court, to the appellate division. But on and on it goes. You see it in schools like in New Orleans, where they have choice. The Justice Department is going after them. You see it on elections. Vote in voter ID, I mean you have to show ID to get smokes, to get booze, or to drive. But hey, voting, which determines the course of this country, and that's somehow out of bounds. So they make the law up as it goes. The rule of law has to be restored. Our founders specifically wrote the Constitution to make sure government wasn't efficient in terms of speed, but was deliberate. To make sure, as they pointed out, passion is something they feared. They wanted things to be considered. And that there was a true consensus. Then it became the law of the land. And so you get frustrated with Congress, so what? That's part of the system. You don't go around and say, I'll do it anyway. That's what they do in other countries, but not in the United States of America. It's about time we now have the opportunity, after the disappointment of 2012, to rectify the situation in 2014, this November, and then do it finally in 2016 to get a candidate again as we had in 1980, when we had a malaise decade. The amazing thing about the American people is, even when we get these bad periods, amazingly, things still positively happen. I was visiting Harry Stein today. Extraordinary what he's doing in seeds. We wrote about it in Forbes, what he did with soybeans, and now he's doing with corn. Once upon a time, as he pointed out in the 30s, 27 bushels per acre. Now it's 150. He thinks he can get at least a 300 and perhaps higher. Now some are skeptical, but that's entrepreneurship. It's always greeted with skepticism, but as people who are not bound by convention and make positive things happen. So we're in a country where we're in a malaise today. We are doing great things. In the 1970s, the malaise decade. None of you are old enough to remember the 70s. That's called pandering. I tried it here in Iowa, it didn't work, which is why I'm here tonight. In the 1970s, very, very rough decade for the country as a whole. Look what was happening. Look what was happening. New entities, FedEx, Southwest Airlines, Amgen, Microsoft, Apple, Oracle. All these great things happening, which burgeoned finally when we got a decent environment. Now the great companies of today. It's all around us. Extraordinary things are happening on the medical side. Finally, we're finally beginning to realize the promise of using our own immune systems to attack various forms of cancer. Wrote about it in a recent issue of Forbes. Amazing things. Patients who were on the verge suddenly had what seemed were miraculous recoveries. Initially very expensive. This gets to something unique about true free markets. Free markets, free enterprise, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is always portrayed as somehow an unsavory system. We need it because it gives us material wealth, but somehow it's based on greed, based on material instincts, bringing out the worst in us. The rich get richer, the stronger get stronger, profits before people. You hear all the raps in Hollywood and Hollywood movies. Research has shown that businessmen, very rarely businesswomen, it's always men, kill more people than serial killers in Hollywood movies. And they're either obesely fat, with jowls that go up and down in glee as they figure out how to make our lives miserable, or bony, skinny thin as their spindly fingers rub in glee as they find out how to kill our pets and pollute our waters and kill our air. All of these cliches. Yet in essence, the amazing thing is free enterprise. We've got to get our voice on this more and more. You've got a flavor of it tonight. Free enterprise is the truly moral system, not big government. It's a moral system because you succeed in true free markets by meeting the needs and wants of other people. Ponder that. It's about exchange, what Adam Smith talked about, trade. You give something, get something in return. Each gets something from it. Now, he talked about getting dinner, butcher and the baker. They want your money, you want the food. Each gets something from the exchange. Greed means taking something that doesn't belong to you. That's not how free markets work. So even if you're that Hollywood caricature, even if you're that personality that lusts for money, even if you're the kind of personality that makes babies cry and dogs bark when you walk down the street, you don't succeed unless you provide something that somebody else wants. It forces you, without even knowing it, to pay attention to the needs and wants of other people. Most people don't even realize the system works like that. Adam Smith understood a handful of others, but it's a moral system. And this idea that philanthropy and commerce are two polar opposites, no, they're two sides of the same coin, meeting the needs and wants of others. The skill set may be different. People who do one well in one and the other may be different, although some who do well in commerce do very well in philanthropy. But they're one and the same, meaning that's why you get the seeming paradox of America. We're the most commercial nation ever invented, yet we're the most philanthropic nation in the world. It's not a paradox. Two sides of the same coin. Other people meeting their needs and wants, and doing it effectively, and doing it in new ways. You see it in free enterprise all the time. They make it sound like free markets are anti-people. No, they're pro-people. They force you to pay attention to other people. First, you have to put together teams and cooperation and make things happen. All around the world, we call them today supply chains, but people don't even know each other, work together. No one's in charge, but it works. And so you take the iPad, parts all around the world. They may be assembled in China, but only $10 of those $170 worth of parts are actually manufactured in China. The rest are from around the world, including $10 of parts from the US. Come from Germany, Malaysia, Japan, all over, come together, then come back here. The design is here. 250,000 jobs created by Apple. Numerous pension funds benefit from what Apple does. People get products, but all about cooperation. Then about trust, not blind trust, but figuring out how to make it easier for strangers to do transactions with each other. We take it for granted, but it's amazing. We take it for granted in this country. You want to do something? You want to get the best people possible. That's new in human affairs. That's a fairly recent thing. In many cultures, you don't go beyond your immediate family. You don't trust anyone beyond your village or your ethnic group. Here, you want to get the best people possible. That's fairly new in the course of human affairs. In humanity, free markets know just the opposite. You may not love your neighbor, but you sure want to sell to your neighbor. You want the neighbor to feel that you love him or her, so you buy, you do transactions. So all the raps about free markets are just the absolute opposite. Are free markets perfect? Of course not. Human beings are not perfect. But in terms of enabling people to do things, what is economics all about? It's not all of these equations that confuse. It's about knowledge. What separates us from the people of the Stone Age? George Gilder, in his book, Knowledge and Power, pointed out the obvious. He said the difference between us and people of the Stone Age, it's not that we have different bodies, we have the same appetites living on the same planet. The difference is we know more. We have more knowledge, and knowledge comes from constant experimentation, seeing what works and what doesn't work. Failure is not a thing that's to be avoided. You can learn from those setbacks. Great entrepreneurs always learn. No one's born an entrepreneur. Maybe they think they are, but they have to learn. Steve Jobs had the worst personality possible. Read Walter Isaacson's book. This guy was impossible. No HR department would look at him and say, oh my God, stay away from this guy. And so he starts a great company, gets fired from his own company by the age of 30, before he's the age of 30. And he went out, created a new computer, didn't do too well, had some successes, setbacks, but in the 12 years, when he was fired and when he went back to Apple, he learned how to be an effective leader through the pain of mistakes in the marketplace, through things that were once things that made it impossible to bring an effective team together. So even though he was the same person, he had learned how to bring a very talented team together, and people work for a shared purpose and create a great company. He learned from personal experience. Henry Ford learned from failure. 2 major bankruptcies, almost had a third. This gets to about free markets and the whole debate on health care. Free markets, when allowed to operate, always turn scarcity into abundance. Always, when you allow it. Ford, that 110 years ago, a car cost the equivalent of $120,000 each. Ford comes along and turns a thing that was a thing for tinkerers, rich people, to something that every working person could afford, as he improved the moving assembly line. You see it with cell phones. Now we call them mobile devices. 30 years ago, the first one, big as a shoebox. Look at those pictures. 40-minute battery life. Cost the first one from Motorola, $3,995. Today, they're everywhere, 7 billion around the world. Most of them are free when you sign up for certain plans. They do everything now. You have the whole world at your fingertips. They do everything now except maybe grow hair, comb hair. Maybe the next models will do that. It's amazing. Now they have smartphones coming along, smart devices, going to cost in a couple of years $35, even if you don't have a phone plan. We ran a piece on Forbes.com the other day pointing out this is going to do more to fight illiteracy and innumeracy than any other thing in the world. Even if you have a bad government in an underdeveloped country, people with these devices they can easily now afford are going to learn, teach themselves, learn from others what those numbers mean, because they know the whole world can be at their fingertips. You can be in the most remote area of India and learn what's happening in Bombay to the products that you're growing in this remote, inaccessible area. So that's what free markets are about. It's about not one of the worst things economists did was to talk about economics as the allocation of scarce resources. That does not get the heart of moving. It just does not do it. What it's about is creating resources. Take, for example, oil. We call it a natural resource. There's nothing natural about oil. What is oil? In and of itself is gooey stuff. Try to feed it to animals, see what happens. You can't drink it, can't eat it, can't feed it to camels. I mean, just as a glop. What turned this goo into something a modern economy can't live without is human ingenuity. You see it with microchip, symbol of our age. Basis, sand, silicon. Not going to run out of that stuff anytime soon. Who knew when you're on the beach, those grains of sand could be the basis of having the whole world at your fingertips. And huge advances are coming. I mentioned what's happening in terms of fighting diseases. The other day, I had a chance to have this little device. Looks like a shrunken cell phone. Put your fingers on the bottom, it does your EKG. Matter of seconds. Those little lines go up and down. Matter of seconds will tell you got a problem or you don't. This kind of diagnostic equipment, of course the administration puts a tax on that. Diagnostic equipment, something good, let's tax it, make sure there's less of it, slow down the advance. Weird. That's what passes for liberalism these days. We got to point that out. We want these guys in charge of innovation. We would still be using horses. I love horses, but I'd rather ride a car. Thank you very much. And so great things are about to come. And that's why we have to fight and fight hard on these elections. Take health care. Ask yourself, why in the world do we have a health care crisis? It's not the quality of health care in this country. We got the best in the world, as mentioned some people at lunch today. We have the greatest longevity of any country in the world, contrary to what you may read. The way they make it sound like we don't do as well as other countries' longevity, because they include deaths from automobile accidents. We drive, we're a big country, we drive more than other countries. And also homicides. We've reduced it, but it's still high. And they have nothing to do, homicides and vehicular accidents have nothing to do with health care. You take out those things that have nothing to do with health care, we are by far the highest and best in the world. And longevity above the age of 60, very hard to get those gains. It's one thing to cut infant mortality, infectious diseases. But above the age of 60, tough to do. We do it better than any other country in the world. And great things are coming. But the government smothers health care, which it intends to do. Those innovations will stay a-borning. It's not enough to invent something. You have to have an environment where those things can be developed. China's credited with inventing paper, gunpowder, the compass, and many other things. But they had a system that hundreds of years ago that made sure these things could not be developed. That was the difference between us and them. We allowed experimentation, allowed these things to be developed more and more and more. That's how we made these great advances. You see it in agriculture, what Harry Stein has done, what others have done. So high tech is not just Silicon Valley. It's everything. And sometimes it's not even glorious stuff. I mean, for example, you go to a coffee shop, go to Starbucks or one of these coffee shops, they have 3 sizes, 12 ounce, 16 ounce, 20 ounce cups. You know, so the lids are all the same size. That just didn't happen. Design a cup, lid in a way where you don't have to keep 3 different sizes of lids for 12, 16, and 20 ounces. All these seemingly small things move ahead. And some are kind of crazy, which I don't understand. For example, blue jeans, anyone can buy a piece of machinery and turn out a denim. And somebody figured out years ago that if you sewed somebody's name on the butt, why you could charge like Willie Nelson, 50, 60, 70 bucks to sit on Willie. So somebody else figured out that if you made these things so you couldn't get in them, why you would charge $100, $150, $200. Great stuff, can't get on, must be great. And somebody else figured out that if you made these things look like they came out of a dumpster, well, that's high fashion, $300, $400, $500. Imagine, oh, looks like you ripped the thing. Oh, yes, this is great. It's amazing, it's amazing. But this is what free enterprise is about. Big things, small things. Old industries going back 10,000 years to the newest. Always innovation, people constantly finding ways to do things differently and better. Always constantly changing. This is what the message we have to take. The so-called new normal is the new abnormal. This recovery has been punk. It's no reason for it. The natural thing is for this country to be growing, the rest of the world growing. But you look around the world, why are they falling behind? You look at Western Europe. You know why Italy and other those countries are having trouble? They're showing little signs of life now, but they tax everything to death. During the crisis, they called it austerity. It wasn't much government austerity. Most of it fell in the private sector. More and more new taxes, make it impossible to have flexibility in the labor markets. So in Spain, they raised their top tax rate to 52%, raised the national sales tax, what they call the value-added tax. Got unemployment up to 27%, youthful unemployment 50%. 50. Now they're showing a little bit of sign of life. France, the president there finally raised the top tax rate to 75%. Wonder why people are moving to Belgium. Belgium's never been known as a tax haven, but 50 is better than 75. Now you won't believe this story, but the president of France, after finally getting this through, he had some constitutional challenges, then makes a speech the other day saying he's now in favor of tax cuts. People wondering what came about. Well, some provided the answer. He's got a new girlfriend. This is true. He's not married, but he had an official first lady. But apparently he had a couple of other candidates. And when he was visiting one of these potential new first ladies, he thought he could preserve his privacy and disguise himself by wearing, this is an absolutely true story, a motorcycle helmet. You know, they're big, they cover the head. So here he comes in a presidential limousine, security around him, but he's disguised wearing this helmet. No scriptwriter could get away with this. But so maybe the new official first lady sees on taxes. But anyway, this is the reality of the world today. In Japan, they have their highest tax rate. They've been stuck in the water for 20 years. Yeah, they had a good first quarter, but they always have these bumps, and then they go back into stagnation. You know, at their top income tax rate, 55. They're now doubling their national sales tax from 5 to 10%, just raised it to 8, now it's going to go to 10. And they have a payroll tax. We have a payroll tax in this country. 15.3% we put employer-employee together. 2.9 is Medicare. There's no cap on that. All your earned income, so-called, is subject to that tax. But we do have a cap on the Social Security portion, which combined employer-employees 12.4%. It's about 118,000, goes up a couple thousand each year in this formula. So 15 overall, but a cap on most of it. Japan has no cap on their sales tax, in addition to having a high income tax. You know what their tax is? It's not 15, it's 30.
Wow.
30%. And it's going to go up in a couple of years to 37%. They wonder why they're stuck in the water. So on health care, Great things are coming. We're starting finally. Ask yourself again why we have this healthcare crisis. It's because we don't have real free markets. We have disconnect between providers and consumers, all third party. So the system doesn't work as well as it should. We had a nice dinner time. Imagine going out to dinner, ordering a nice bottle of wine, and saying, I don't care what it costs, let Blue Shield or Blue Cross worry about it. Let them sort the thing out. Because when you go to a clinic or hospital, you ask in advance what something costs. You get a very strange look. It means either one of two things. Either you're uninsured or you're crazy. Why would you want to know the price? What's it to you? Because we've grown up with it, we don't realize how strange that is. But that's beginning to change. And this is the great hope, one of the great hopes of this country. We're not going to have what we had before. We're not going to have Obamacare. A new system is born. A positive system where the first time in decades the patient will truly be in charge. You're starting to see little signs of it. You're starting to see little signs of it. You're starting to see walk-in clinics, drugstores, and other stores if the regulators allow it. They have a nurse practitioner. Research has shown that 80% of our medical maladies can be done by nurses and technicians. We don't need the physician. Save the physician for the real big stuff. So you go into this walk-in clinic, do whatever needs to be done. If something serious, then they send you to the hospital in the emergency room. You see it too in flu shots. Once upon a time, you wanted a flu shot. You could have made an appointment with the doctor or the clinic, walked in, appointment time, got the flu shot. Today, they're everywhere. Flu season comes, you can go anywhere and get a flu shot. Go to the gas station, they fill her up, give me a flu shot, wipe the windshield. It's everywhere. But new ways of doing delivery. It's coming. You see LASIK surgery for the eyes because there's not a disconnect between provider and consumer. Guess what happens? It costs less today than it did 10 years ago. Our publisher, Rich Carlgard, had it done 10 years ago, so he doesn't have to wear these things. Cost him $5,000. Told me the other day, he said he can get a better procedure today for about $2,500. That's what free markets do, turn scarcity into abundance if we allow it. You see it in agriculture. The crisis of this country is obesity, not a lack of food. It's a miracle. We take it for granted. And that's what we have to hammer home. Healthcare, we can turn what looks like a hopeless liability to the most fantastic growth industry ever, because healthcare is personal. And why can't we do in healthcare what we do with food? I mean, our government's involved in food, but government doesn't run agriculture. If it did, we'd have no more obesity. We'd all be starving. We tried in Russia and China, did not work out very well decades ago. So agriculture produces food, private companies process the food, truckers and others deliver the food, everyone from grocery stores, supermarkets, hotels sell the food. People have a problem getting it. We have everything from food banks to food stamps to do with it. Why can't we do the same thing in healthcare? Allow real free markets, allow entrepreneurship, allow doctors to actually focus time on patients instead of paperwork, computer work, focus on the practice of medicine, and have effective have effective safety nets instead of the higgly-piggly system we have today. Do it in food, we can do it in healthcare, and we will. So on healthcare, my advice is just don't get sick for the next 3 years as this thing sorts itself out. You'll be fine. So on the tax side, we're going to get it. There's already consensus emerging. Remember the Simpson-Bowles Commission the president appointed 3.5 years ago? There was a consensus that if they decluttered the tax code, they could cut tax rates across the board. Not as much as I would like, but people are getting the idea. This thing is an abomination. You've heard the litany before. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address defined the character of the American nation, 272 words. Declaration of Independence, 1,300 words. Constitutional amendment, 7,200 words. Bible with all the, which took centuries to put together, 773,000 words. The Federal Income Tax Code and all the attendant rules and regulations, 9 million words and rising. Nobody knows what's in it. The IRS doesn't know what's in it. You don't have to go to the Amazon to find exotic creatures. They're crawling around in the code. And I think what's going to emerge after 2016, even though a lot of people don't fully grasp it yet, we're going to start all over again. Devise the code to just start all over. We have a good example of why that has to be done. The head of the Ways and Means Committee in the House, a good man named David Kemp, who's going to retire at the end of the year, sat down a couple of years ago and made a real faith effort with others to come up with ways to reform this impossible code. They unveiled their report a couple of months ago to simplify the tax code. This proposed bill runs 1,000 pages. You need 1,000 pages to simplify something. It shows it is beyond redemption. And I think in 2016, a lot of candidates are going to be advocating and hold their feet to the fire. We can have a discussion about what we do, but that's what the discussion should be about. And finally, on a subject that will put you maybe to sleep, I hope not, because I've got a book coming out in a couple of weeks on it, on money and monetary policy. But the thing to remember about money and what the Federal Reserve has done to the dollar is a travesty. The American dollar is not a plaything for mandarins in Washington. The dollar is supposed to make it easier for people to do trade with one another, transactions with one another. Unless you have a gold coin or something, money in itself has no intrinsic value. Money is a measure of value. The way a scale measures weight, the way a ruler measures length, or a clock measures time. Money is a measure of value. And so it should be fixed in value, instead of this rubber ball they have down in Washington. Because what does money do? It makes it easy to do transactions. In the old days, you had barter. If I sold an ad in Forbes 3,000 years ago, how would I get paid? Perhaps with a herd of goats. I'm being a little facetious here, but let's say I wanted to buy iPads for our writers 3,000 years ago. So I go to the iPad store with my herd of goats. I say, I want to buy iPads. The store owner says, I don't want goats, I want sheep. So then I have to figure out how to swap the goats for sheep, perhaps hire a sheep herder, make sure the wolves don't eat the sheep. The sheep herder wants wine. I have red wine, he wants white wine, and it just becomes very cumbersome. Very cumbersome. So money was invented. First coins, they say, came in Lydia. Then Athens adopted it, became a great commercial, cultural center. So whether it's coins, a piece of paper, or it's on a computer, money is a means of making transactions possible. It means ultimately you create money, not people in Washington, D.C. And when they move away from that, bad things happen. It distorts the economy, slows it down. You don't get the kind of investment you have for the future if you can't trust the money. Money only works because there's no intrinsic value through trust. It's a form of communication of value. When you violate that trust, it undermines everything in society. Social trust. We don't even realize it. Keynes got one thing right. He said not one in a million realize how destructive this process is, undermining the social order. And you can't trust something as basic as money, which enables strangers to do transactions with one another and allows us extraordinary circles of cooperation now to encircle the whole globe. Gets in the way of innovation. So change is coming on that. And that's why we've got to fight and fight hard. Freedom, free markets, free people. Lincoln said the opportunity to improve one's lot in life. That is the essence of this country, which is why anyone from around the world can come here, wants to come here, because they know they have a chance to get ahead. My grandfather was one of 10 children, grade school education, comes here and has a chance to achieve success. Again, life is not always smooth, but it's gaining that new knowledge constantly. Whether agriculture has been with us for 10,000 years, or the new highest high-tech breakthroughs in chips and the like. So that's why we have to fight. But it's not just for our country, it's for the world. If we get it right, the world has a chance to get it right. But if we flounder, ultimately the rest of the world flounders. So that's why we've got to fight hard. We have a great group of candidates here for the Congressional District 3rd, and we've got a great group of senatorial candidates. We've got some good candidates emerging around the country. We've got to make sure what happened in 2012 does not happen again. Have that positive Reagan-esque program. We don't have to worry about demographics. Oh, young people like us. Reagan was the oldest president we had and scored very well among young people, profoundly well, because he had that positive message that gave them hope that they could participate and discover their God-given inner talents. So this is not just an election. These next two elections are critical. We got to get it right. Thankfully, thanks to the energy here tonight, I think we can have confidence we can get it right. Once again, make this country a true beacon, not only for ourselves, but for civilization. Thank you very much.